My name is James Carter. I've been working as a night shift taxi driver in New York for exactly 12 years. At night, you see this city in a way that people who only see it during the day could never even imagine. People who get in after 2 in the morning usually fall into 3 groups: the drunks, the ones trying to hurry home, and the ones who don't want to talk. But over the years, I learned that there is a 4th group as well. They were passengers who belonged nowhere. I haven't told this story even to my family until today, because everyone I told said the same thing. You were just hallucinating from fatigue. I wish that were true, because after that night, whenever a passenger sat in the back seat, I could never look at the rearview mirror the same way again. If you ever get into a taxi late at night and the driver is constantly checking the rearview mirror, maybe he isn't watching you like you think he is. Maybe he sees someone else sitting next to you. This happened in November 2024. It was a Thursday night. It had been raining all day, and after midnight, a fine drizzle continued. The wet asphalt turned the light of neon signs into a mirror. On nights like this, business was always good. People called taxis instead of walking. It was exactly 02:17. While waiting at a red light near Times Square, a new call dropped on my phone. The passenger was only 2 blocks away from me. Normally, the app would show the passenger's name and rating, but this time there was only a single letter in the name section. There was no rating visible, there was no profile photo either. At first, I thought the app was glitching. "Forget it, James," I said to myself. "Pick up the passenger and drop them off." Minutes later, I arrived at the specified address. The street was completely empty. There was neither anyone walking nor a waiting passenger, just as I was about to cancel the call. Rear right door opened slowly. I heard the door open, but I didn't see the person who came in at all. Only the sound of the door closing came. I looked in the rearview mirror. A young woman in her mid-20s was sitting there. Her long black hair was wet down to her shoulders. She was wearing a white coat. Her head was tilted slightly forward. I couldn't quite make out her face. "Address we're going to is registered in the system," she said. Her voice was extremely calm. I looked at the navigation on my phone. The address was loaded automatically, but it was a street I had never heard of before, quite far outside the city center. It was in an old neighborhood. I started the engine and hit the road. For the first 5 minutes, the woman didn't say a single word. I didn't speak either. Then I noticed something strange in the rearview mirror. Water was still dripping from the woman's hair, but her coat was bone dry. Even stranger, the fabric of the back seat was completely dry as well. Someone who had been waiting under so much rain should have definitely left a wet spot where they sat. I turned my head slightly and looked directly into the back. The woman was indeed there, but when I looked back at the mirror, for a second, the back seat appeared completely empty. My heart suddenly accelerated. I even considered hitting the brakes, but I managed to hold myself back. When I looked in the mirror again, the woman was there once more. Her head was still tilted forward. It seemed as though I had imagined the back seat being completely empty just a few seconds ago. I must be tired, I thought. I was working my 6th consecutive night shift that week. Things like this could happen sometimes. The rain was tapping rhythmically against the windows. The wipers ran nonstop, clearing my view for a few seconds with every pass. The navigation was taking me out of Manhattan. Y'all were almost completely empty at this hour of the night. Except for a few vehicles passing by occasionally, the city was unusually quiet. Just as we were crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, the woman spoke again for the first time. "You use this road every night." There was a strange calm in her voice. Neither fear nor curiosity was felt. "Sometimes," I said. "It depends on the job." Woman went silent for a few seconds. Then she asked a question I didn't expect at all. "Has anyone ever died in your back seat before?" My feet froze on the gas pedal. I looked at her through the mirror. She didn't seem to be joking. "No," I said shortly. "Good." She only said that afterward. She sank back into silence. An unexplainable uneasiness had begun to build up inside me. I wanted to turn on the radio to normalize the atmosphere a bit. The first channel gave nothing but static. The second channel was silent. On the third channel, an old jazz song started playing. Just as I was about to turn up the volume, the woman spoke softly. "Turn it off." Why? The last night I heard this song, I died. My fingers froze on the knob for a few seconds. I couldn't say anything. Then I tried to laugh. "Good joke." Woman didn't answer. She only raised her head a bit more. For the first time, I could see half of her face. Her skin was much paler than normal. Her lips were almost turning purple. But the thing that really bothered me wasn't her eyes, it was her breath. Because the window in front of the rearview mirror was fogging up with my breath. But on the window of the side where the woman was sitting, not a single trace of breath was forming. At that moment, the navigation on my phone suddenly froze. The screen went black. A second later, it restarted on its own. The route had changed. I hadn't touched anything. The new destination was the same street, but the house number had changed. The address we were going to a moment ago was number 217 now. It said 219 just as I noticed this. The woman said in a very low voice, "No, we're going to the wrong house again." Sentence the woman said changed the air inside the cabin in an instant. "We're going to the wrong house again." That word again got stuck in my head. It was as if she had experienced this journey many times before. I looked at her through the rearview mirror. This time she had raised her head, watching the outside through the side window where rain droplets were trickling down. "What do you mean?" I asked. She didn't answer. For about a minute there was only the sound of the engine and the rhythm of the wipers. Then the woman spoke slowly. "Shortly you will see an old gas station on the right side." I looked at the navigation. No such place appeared on the map. About 30 seconds later, an old gas station that was clearly not used for years really appeared on the right of the road. Rusted pumps, broken signs, and a dark building. I felt like I had been punched cold in the stomach. It might be normal for the woman to see it, but her predicting a place that didn't appear on the navigation beforehand was not normal at all. "How do you know that place?" I said. The woman didn't answer again. A few minutes later, she spoke once more. "Shortly we will stop at a red light. On the left side you will see an old man in a black coat. Do not open the door." This time I thought to myself, all right, enough. I had started thinking she was playing games with me. At the end of the road, the red light really turned on. I stopped the vehicle. I involuntarily looked to the left. There, an old man in a black coat was really standing. The man was looking towards me. Then he slowly raised his hand and gestured as if calling a taxi. Taking a passenger at this hour of the night was normal. I reached for the button to roll down the window a bit. A harsh voice came from the back seat. "Don't do it." My hand stayed on the button. I looked at the woman in the mirror. For the first time, there was fear on her face. "Don't let him into your car." "Why?" "Because he stopped me that night too." After these words, I looked back at the old man's face. He wasn't moving at all. It was raining, but not a single drop of water was visible on his coat. The green light turned on. I pressed the gas. Just as I passed by the man, I involuntarily looked in the rearview mirror. The man was still on the sidewalk, but at the same time, he was looking at me through the rear window as well. A person couldn't be in two different places at the same time. My heart started beating like crazy. I increased my speed. Just then, the sound of a seatbelt buckle closing came from the back of the taxi. Click! I looked in the mirror. The woman was still in her place, but she wasn't alone anymore. On the other side of the back seat, the old man who was standing on the sidewalk just a moment ago was sitting silently. And I had not heard any of the rear doors opening. My breath hitched. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. I looked in the rearview mirror again. The old man was really there. The collar of his black coat still looked dry. His head was tilted slightly forward. As for the woman, she wasn't moving at all. Neither of them said a single word as they sat. There was such a heavy silence inside the taxi that I could feel even the smallest vibration of the engine. A few seconds later, the old man spoke. "Wrong way." His voice was muffled and deep. It was as if it wasn't a person speaking, but a recording from an old radio. "Where do I need to go?" I asked. The man didn't answer. The woman slowly turned her head. "Don't speak to him." "Why?" "Because the more he speaks, the more real he becomes." As soon as she said this, the temperature inside the taxi dropped all at once. The windshield began to fog up. The AC was turned all the way up, but the glass was completely covered within seconds. While I was trying to wipe the glass with my hand, the old man spoke again. "Turn right." Meanwhile, the navigation was telling me to keep straight. Two different directions, two different voices. I didn't know which one to trust. In the end, I listened to the navigation. I continued straight. Just as I crossed the intersection, a very hard impact came from the back of the taxi. Thud, it was as if another vehicle had hit me. I hit the brakes out of reflex. I got out of the car. I looked at the rear bumper. There wasn't even a single scratch, but on the ground, there were fresh footprints on the wet asphalt, bare footprints. Even though it was raining, they weren't being erased. The tracks came right up to the rear door of my taxi. Then they suddenly vanished. I checked the surroundings. There was nobody. I sat back in the driver's seat. The woman was still in her place, the old man as well. As if I had never gotten out, I started the engine again. This time, neither the woman nor the old man spoke. About 5 minutes later, the navigation said we had reached the destination. We were in front of an old, 3-story apartment building. All the windows of the building were dark. No light was burning in any apartment. The woman smiled softly for the first time. We finally arrived at the right place. You getting off here? Yes. Then why are you still sitting? The woman looked at me. For the first time, our eyes met. The part of her eyes that should have been black was missing. The entirety of it was pale gray. Then very slowly she said this, because you haven't opened the door yet. At that exact moment, the taxi's central locking unlocked on its own, click, and the rear right door began to open slowly outward. The rear door opened slowly all the way without any of us touching it. Cold air flooded into the cabin. It was still raining, but the sound of drops wasn't the only sound coming from outside. It was as if dozens of people were whispering at the same time from inside the apartment building. I couldn't make out the words, but I was sure someone was talking. The woman turned toward the door. She didn't get off. She just looked outside. The old man also raised his head and looked in the same direction. Both of them were acting as if they were waiting for someone. Close the door, I said. Nobody answered. I was starting to get angry. I reached out my hand and pressed the central locking button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. On the instrument panel, all doors appeared locked, but the rear door was still open wide. Right at that moment, I saw a movement in the darkness at the entrance of the apartment building. A woman was walking toward us with slow steps. She was wearing a white coat. Her long black hair was flowing down her shoulders. My heart almost stopped because the very same woman was sitting in my back seat. I looked at the mirror. The woman in the back seat was in her place. I looked outside again. The woman coming from the apartment building was identical. Both of them were exact duplicates of each other. As the woman outside approached the taxi, the woman in the back seat began to smile. For the first time, there was emotion on her face. Then she spoke quietly. Late, she say this to me, or to the woman outside. I couldn't understand. The woman outside stopped in front of the rear door. She bent down slowly. She looked inside. Then our eyes met. There wasn't a single expression on her face. It was as if she were not a living person, but a mannequin made of wax. She looked at me for a few seconds. Then she shifted her gaze to the back seat. They met eyes with the woman sitting there, both of them at the same time, made the exact same smile, and at the same time they said the exact same sentence. Now one of us can leave. At that moment, the old man turned to me for the first time. His eyes were pitch black. He leaned slowly toward my ear. His voice was almost as close as his breath. Do you know which one you took into your car? Before I could answer. Both women in the back seat began to turn toward me at the same time because there was no longer one woman sitting in the back seat of the taxi, but two. At that moment, my brain stopped completely. I looked in the rearview mirror again and again. I wasn't mistaken. A few seconds ago, there was only one woman in the back seat. Now both of them were sitting shoulder to shoulder, the same face, the same hair, the same white coat, the same gray eyes. They were even looking at me in the same way without breathing. As for the old man, he had bowed his head forward again as if he had completed his duty. My instincts were telling me only one thing: run. Without thinking about anything, I put the gear into D and slammed on the gas pedal as hard as I could. The rear door was still open. I was waiting for the door to close through the mirror, but it didn't. Even as the taxi moved, it remained open all the way. I sped away from the street. After going about 100 meters, I looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. The old man wasn't there. The women weren't there either. There was only the door standing open. I pulled the car over to the side of the road and got out. I closed the rear door with my hand. My hands were shaking. I tried to take deep breaths for a few minutes. Then I got behind the wheel again. The notification sound came from the app on my phone. Trip completed. The fare was paid automatically. The payment amount was normal. But the name of the sender caught my attention, Anna Carter. My blood ran cold when I saw the last name. My last name was Carter too. I tried to access the passenger details. The profile picture opened. The woman in the photo was the woman who was sitting in my back seat just a moment ago. I looked at the account creation date underneath. November 14, 2011, exactly 13 years ago. I gave in to my curiosity. I drove the car back to the street where the apartment building was located. When I arrived at the street, police tape had been pulled. There were 2 police vehicles and an ambulance. I approached a police officer and asked what happened. He looked at me with an astonished expression. "Do you know this place? I just dropped off a passenger here a moment ago." The police officer went silent for a few seconds. Then he pointed to the apartment building. A young woman was murdered in this building 13 years ago. Her name was Anna Carter. My heart felt like it was going to stop. The police officer continued. She had gotten into a taxi. Because the driver took her to the wrong address, the young woman tried to walk home at night. A vehicle hit her on the road and ran. The woman lost her life at the scene. I couldn't breathe. After saying the last sentence, the police officer pulled an old, yellowed photo from his pocket. We couldn't find the driver either, because he vanished 2 days after the accident. I looked at the photo, an old yellow New York taxi, and the driver behind the wheel was me. No, it wasn't me. But he looked exactly like me, the same face, the same eyes, the same scar. The police officer didn't notice this. But I noticed. I went home that night. I never worked the night shift again. A month later, I sold the taxi completely. Months passed. My life had begun to return to normal. Until one night, a new notification came to my phone. It came from the old taxi app. Even though I had deleted my account months ago, the notification still came. On the screen, it only said, "New ride request passenger. Anna Carter pickup location." The back seat. At that moment, I looked at my own reflection in the living room window. I moved, but my reflection in the glass moved about a second later and whispered with a smile, "This time we will go to the right address." My name is Ethan Brooks. For more than 15 years, I worked as a night taxi driver in Chicago. Throughout my life, I took thousands of people to their homes, airports, hospitals, and sometimes to places they would see for the very last time. In this profession, over time, you learn to read people by their faces. You understand in a few seconds who is drunk, who is lying, and who is scared. But one night, there was a man who got into my car. I picked him up 3 times in the same night. All 3 from different places, all 3 at different hours, and in all 3, he knew what I was going to say before I did. During the first encounter, I thought it was a coincidence. During the second, I thought he was following me. And during the third, I realized he wasn't following me anymore. The real problem was that I was following him. This happened in December 2023. Winter nights in Chicago are the kind that soak into your bones. It wasn't snowing, but the temperature was -8 degrees. There was a thin layer of fog under the streetlights. On nights like this, people wouldn't go outside unless necessary. Around 01:36 at night, a new call came through the app. The passenger's location was a narrow street opposite an old train station. When I arrived there, only a single man was waiting on the sidewalk. He looked to be around 50 years old. He was wearing a long black coat. He wasn't wearing gloves. It was strange for his hands to be bare in this weather. He got into the car. He closed the door silently. He didn't say good evening, nor did he say the address he was going to, because the address was already showing on the app. He didn't say a single word throughout the journey. I didn't break the silence either. About 10 minutes later, the man spoke abruptly. "Shortly, your phone will ring." I knitted my brows. "Excuse me." In 3 seconds, before I could answer, my phone really rang. It was my sister calling. I didn't answer while behind the wheel. The phone went silent. There was silence in the car again. A few minutes later, the man spoke once more. "Right now, you just wondered who I am." Hairs on my neck stood on end, because I was indeed thinking exactly that at that moment. I looked at him through the rearview mirror. His face was turned toward the window. He wasn't even looking at me, but it was as if he was reading my mind. A strange uneasiness began to build inside me. I watched him a few more times through the rearview mirror. His face was quite ordinary. There was no scar nor any other feature that caught attention. If you saw him on a crowded street, you wouldn't turn to look a second time. But his eyes were not normal at all. He was constantly looking out the front windshield, yet he barely blinked his eyes. "Do we know each other?" I asked. The man shook his head slightly from side to side. Yet, this answer disturbed me even more. "Do you mean? You'll understand in a few hours." I didn't speak this time. Inside, I just wanted this journey to end. We were approaching the destination on the navigation. It was a quiet neighborhood with old apartment buildings. There was not a single person on the street. I stopped the vehicle in front of the sidewalk. "Your destination." Before opening the door, the man pulled an old $20 bill from his pocket. However, the payment appeared to have been made through the app. "Tip," he said. "Thank you." I took the money. As the man got off, he looked at me one last time. "Spend this money." "Why?" "Because it already belongs to you." Just as I was about to ask what he meant, he closed the door. He stepped onto the sidewalk. I unbuckled my seatbelt and looked at my phone for a few seconds. When I raised my head again, the man had vanished. Both ends of the street were straight. Even if he ran, he should have been visible. But there was no one around. What chilled me to the core was not this. When I looked at the $20 bill I was holding in my hand, my breath hitched. On the bottom right corner of the bill, there was a small writing in blue pen. EB. These were my initials, Ethan Brooks, but I had written this before, about 2 years ago. I had a habit of marking the money in my wallet. I would write the same inscription on every banknote along with a small dot. That banknote was the exact same money I had lost years ago. For a moment, I thought this could be a coincidence. Then my phone vibrated. A new call had come from the app. The passenger's name was not showing. Only his location was there. I looked at the map. The location he was at was exactly 8 kilometers away from the point where I had dropped off the passenger a moment ago. I accepted the call. About 12 minutes later, I reached the address. In front of a foggy, empty bus stop, a single person was waiting. Long black coat, bare hands, and the same expressionless look on his face. He opened the door. He sat in the back seat. He looked at me without smiling. Then he said this in a calm voice. "We meet for the second time, Ethan." My blood drained. I looked at him through the rearview mirror. It was the same man. The same black coat, the same expressionless face, the same motionless gaze. But this time, a small detail had changed. His tie was navy blue during the first journey. Now it was dark burgundy. I don't know why I noticed such a detail, but my brain was telling me that this was important. "I just dropped you off." Man nodded his head slightly. "I know. How do you know this?" "Because I was there too." "What does this mean?" "You'll understand in a bit." I was starting to get angry. "Look, man, if you're playing games with me, I'm really not in the mood." Man smiled softly for the first time. "No, Ethan, I am not playing games with you. I am just a bit further ahead than you." This sentence settled deep inside me. I am a bit further ahead than you. It was as if we were living the same life, but he was a few hours ahead. I looked at the navigation. This time the target was in front of an old hotel in the city center. I started driving the car. About 5 minutes later, the man spoke again. "Shortly, a red car will come out from the right side." I didn't answer at all just as I approached the intersection. Indeed, a red sedan suddenly burst out from the side street. I slammed on the brakes at the last second. Centimeters were left until our collision. I honked the horn. The red car moved away without stopping. My heart was beating like crazy. The man was continuing to look out the window as if nothing had happened. "Is this a coincidence too?" I asked. "That hasn't even started yet," he replied. "What hasn't started?" "You're remembering." "I haven't forgotten anything." Man looked at me. This time, for the first time, there was an emotion in his eyes, sadness. "You all say the same thing." I pulled the car sharply to the right. "Are you? How do you know these things?" The man took a deep breath. Then he pulled an old, folded photograph from his pocket. He extended the photograph to me between the front seats. We had stopped at a red light. I took the photo into my hand. In the photo, there was an old model yellow taxi. The driver behind the wheel was me, or it was someone who looked exactly like me. But the date of the photo was December 18, 1998. In 1998, I was only 8 years old. I turned the photo over. A single sentence was written in blue ballpoint pen. On the third time, you will believe me. Right at that moment, the man spoke in a calm voice. Put the photo in your pocket. Why? Because shortly, you will remember having seen it in your pocket before. I held the photo in my hand for a few more seconds. My fingers were trembling. This is nonsense, I said to myself. I didn't remember the photo being in my pocket. In fact, I was sure it was the first time in my life I had seen it. Yet with a strange feeling, I put it into the inner pocket of my jacket. The man nodded his head slightly as if he already knew I would do this. About 10 minutes later, we arrived in front of the old hotel. The building looked abandoned. Half of its windows were broken. The entrance door was covered in rust. Will you get off here? I asked. The man nodded his head. Yes, he opened the door. Before getting off, he turned to me one last time. In an hour, you will pick me up again. My patience was now exhausted. No, I won't pick you up, because I am quitting the job tonight. Man smiled for the first time. No, Ethan, you won't be able to quit. Why? Because before the third journey takes place, the night does not end. He closed the door. I started watching him through the mirror. He walked toward the hotel. He reached the door. He went inside. I never took my eyes off the door. I waited for exactly 30 seconds. I gave in to my curiosity. I got out of the car. I ran to the entrance. I opened the door. The inside was completely empty, a dusty lobby, broken chairs, a collapsed reception desk. There was nothing else. The man had vanished. There was no second exit inside either. At that moment, my phone rang. It was my sister calling again. This time I answered. Ethan, are you okay? I'm fine. Did you ask? You called me just a moment ago. I didn't call. There was silence on the other end. Then she spoke in a timid voice. Ethan, half an hour ago you called me. You were constantly saying the same sentence. What was I saying? Whatever you do, don't answer the phone after 3 o'clock. Stomach tied into knots, I had never called her. Just as I was about to say this, the call history opened on my phone screen. The last dialed number was indeed my sister. The time, 02:58, 3 minutes ago. But at that time, I hadn't even gotten out of the car. My hands turned to ice. I hung up the phone. I slowly returned to the taxi. When I sat in the driver's seat, I involuntarily looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. I took a deep breath just as I was about to start the engine. The sound of a seatbelt buckle closing came from the back. Click. I slowly turned my head to the mirror. The man in the black coat was sitting in the back seat again, but this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him, I was sitting. And the other Ethan in the back seat looked at me and said a single sentence. The third journey has begun. My breath hitched. I blinked my eyes. I looked in the mirror again. The man in the black coat was still in the same place, but the person sitting beside him was me. The same jacket, the same beard, the same scar. Even the calluses formed on his fingers from gripping the steering wheel were the same. The first thing I thought was that the mirror was playing tricks on me. I turned around quickly. The back seat was completely empty. There was not a single person. I looked in the mirror again. Both of them were there, me. And the man in the black coat, the me in the mirror, smiled slowly. I wasn't smiling, then his lips moved. Stop looking behind you. Out of reflex, I turned around again. Again, there was no one. My heart was beating as if it was going to tear through my chest. I decided to start the car and get away from there. Just as I was about to hit the gas, the navigation opened on its own. New call had dropped. I hadn't accepted anything. On the screen, it only said passenger name. Ethan Brooks. My blood ran cold. This is impossible. The pickup point was only 300 meters ahead from where I was. I tried to cancel the call. The button was not working. The phone was frozen. 5 seconds later, the navigation automatically started the route. Involuntarily, I started driving the car. 300 meters later, I arrived in front of an old bus stop. Someone was waiting there. Because he was far away, I couldn't make out his face. As I got closer, my heart began to beat faster because the person waiting was wearing the exact same jacket I had on. I stopped the car. The door opened. The man sat in the back seat. He raised his head slowly. This was truly me. But he looked older than me. Whites had fallen into his hair. His eyes were sunken. On his face was the fatigue of a person who hadn't slept for years. Without saying anything, he pulled his wallet from his pocket. He extended the ID inside it to me. The name written on the ID, Ethan Brooks. The birth date was also the same as mine. Even the driver's license number was identical. The only difference was the issue date of the driver's license. My driver's license was taken in 2016. His, however, Was 2037. My throat tightened. Are you? The older Ethan closed his eyes. Then he spoke in a very calm voice. I'm the version of you that could never return home. Right at that moment, the man in the black coat began to laugh for the first time, and all the doors of the taxi at the same time locked. The sound of the door locks closing at the same time echoed inside the entire taxi. Click, click, click. Out of reflex, I tried to open the door. It didn't open. I pressed the window buttons. None of them worked. The engine stopped on its own. The headlights went out now. Only the faint light of the streetlight was hitting inside the taxi. There were 3 people in the back seat, the man in the black coat, me, and the other me who looked years older than me. The older Ethan looked at me and spoke quietly. Now listen to me carefully. Shortly, he will ask you a question. Matter what happens, do not answer. Who? I whispered. The older Ethan didn't answer. He just looked at the man in the black coat. The man raised his head slowly. For the first time, I saw his eyes clearly in the place where his eyes should be. There was nothing. 2 pitch-black voids. Then he leaned toward me. Ethan, what time is it? His question was so ordinary that involuntarily I opened my mouth to answer. Just as I was about to speak, the older Ethan shouted. No, I closed my mouth. The man in the black coat looked at me for a few seconds. Then he smiled softly. So you finally learned. At that moment, the taxi's radio turned on by itself. Through the static, a news anchor was speaking. In the traffic accident that occurred tonight, taxi driver Ethan Brooks lost his life at the scene. My breath hitched. I had heard my own name from the radio. The anchor continued. It was reported that the accident occurred at exactly 0300. I looked at the clock on the instrument. Was 1 minute left. The older Ethan turned to me. This is where everything begins. Every night, the same minute, the same question, the same road. I have been trying not to answer for years. You, on the other hand, answered during the first 2 times. Whom? I asked. The older Ethan smiled painfully. To yourself. At exactly 0300, all the lights inside the taxi went out. For about 5 seconds, I couldn't see anything. Then the headlights turned back on. I looked at the back seat. There was no one. The doors were opened. The engine was running as if nothing had happened. With my trembling hands, I turned the ignition and drove away from there at top speed. The next morning, I went to the company headquarters and resigned. I never drove a taxi again for the rest of my life. About 2 years passed. I tried to forget that night. Until last month, an old photo came to my phone from an unknown number. In the photo, there was a yellow taxi. I was sitting behind the wheel, and in the back seat was the man in the black coat. The date the photo was taken. December 18, 2037. Under the photo, only a single sentence was written. This time you will pick me up 3 times. At that moment I realized I had never picked up the same passenger 3 times. In fact, throughout the same night, I was carrying my own future. My name is Marcus Hill. I had been working as a night taxi driver in Los Angeles for about 9 years. In this city, after the sun sets, a completely different life begins. The streets where millions of people wander during the day grow silent when night falls. But it isn't just the streets that remain silent. Sometimes, people grow silent too. The only reason I am telling this story is that maybe one day you too will call a taxi late at night, and on your phone, a call will drop from an address that never existed. That night, the app sent me only a single passenger. The trip lasted only 20 minutes, but out of those 20 minutes, I could never get out again. People still ask me the same question. Why didn't you call the police? Because the police had gone to that address before me, and 12 years ago, it was August 2024. The Los Angeles heat overwhelmed people during the day, but at night, the cool wind coming from the ocean relieved the streets. It was a Saturday night. The bars were just closing and business was quite busy. At exactly 03:11, a new call dropped on my phone. The first thing that caught my attention wasn't the rating, nor was it the passenger's name, because neither was visible. On the app, it only said passenger. That was all. No name, no photo, nor a phone number. I thought it was a system error. I accepted the call. The location took me to the front of an unused theater building on the old side of the city. The building's sign was half broken. Its windows were covered with wooden boards. The entire street was empty. I waited for about 30 seconds just as I was about to cancel. The rear left door opened slowly. I heard the door open, but I didn't hear anyone walking. There was no footstep sound, not even a single step sound on the wet asphalt. There was none. The door closed. I looked in the rear-view mirror. A little girl of about 10 years old was sitting in the back seat. She was wearing an old, light blue dress. Her hair was braided. She had placed her hands on her knees. Her face was calm, but her eyes didn't blink at all. Before I could say a single word, the little girl spoke slowly. "Will you take me home?" The navigation on my phone opened on its own. The destination was chosen automatically. The address was simply this: 742 Willow Street. I hit the road. For about 2 minutes there was silence. Then the little girl, looking out the window, said in a very low voice, "Tonight, we shouldn't be late." At that moment, I felt for the first time that this was no ordinary trip. The little girl's voice was so calm that at first, instead of being scared, I felt sad. A 10-year-old child wandering around alone at 3 in the morning. The first thing a normal person would think of would be to call her family. I thought so too. "Where is your family?" I asked. The girl didn't take her eyes off the window. "At home." "Didn't they come to pick you up?" "Because they aren't waiting for me." This answer settled deep inside me. Why aren't they waiting? This time she looked at me. She smiled very slowly. "Because they don't know I'm coming home." I couldn't understand what she meant. Maybe she had argued with her family. Maybe she had run away. Or maybe I was misinterpreting what she said. We moved forward in silence for a while longer. Then I thought about taking my phone and secretly calling the emergency line. Just as I was unlocking the screen, the little girl spoke. "Call the police." My hand stayed in midair. The phone was in my pocket. I hadn't even opened the screen. How did she know this? "Don't be scared. I'm not a bad person." Her voice didn't tremble while saying this sentence, but for some reason it scared me even more. About 5 minutes later, something strange happened on the navigation. The distance began to change constantly. One moment I looked and 3 minutes were left to the destination. Then suddenly it wrote 12 minutes. Then it dropped back to 2 minutes again. It was as if the road was stretching and shrinking on its own. Just as I was focused on the navigation, the little girl spoke again. "Look to the right." Involuntarily, I was about to turn my head to the right side. I stopped at the last second. "Can't answer." "What is there?" "Just don't look." If you tell people not to look at something, the first thing they want to do is precisely that. I gave in to my curiosity. I turned my head slowly to the right window. For the first few seconds, I couldn't see anything. Then, on the side of the road, I noticed an old bus stop. There were people under the shelter, about 6 or 7 people. They were all standing motionless. They were all looking at me. None of them were talking to each other. When the car's headlights hit them, I could make out their faces. And my blood ran cold because all of them looked wet, but it wasn't raining. The old man at the front raised his hand slowly as if calling a taxi. He gestured to me. Out of reflex, I was about to touch the brake. Right at that moment, the little girl shouted, "Stop!" Her voice had raised for the first time. "No matter what happens, don't stop." I pressed my foot back on the gas. We left the bus stop behind. About 30 seconds later, I summoned my courage and looked in the rear-view mirror. The bus stop was still visible, but it was no longer empty. All of the people from a moment ago were standing in the middle of the road, watching the taxi coming from behind us. Then the little girl whispered in a very quiet voice, "They noticed us." The moment I heard the little girl's whisper, I involuntarily looked in the rear-view mirror again. The bus stop was no longer visible, but the road wasn't empty either. About 200 meters behind us, there was an old model black taxi. Lights were on. Its license plate wasn't visible. It was neither trying to get closer nor moving away. It was maintaining the same distance. "Is it them?" I asked. The little girl shook her head slowly. "No." "Then who?" "The one coming to take us." My throat tightened. "Who is coming to take you?" The girl looked at me this time. The expression on her face had changed for the first time. She was scared. "Me. You." Suddenly, my foot lifted from the gas pedal. I looked at the black taxi through the rear mirror. It was still at the same distance, but the strange thing was, as I sped up, it sped up too. When I slowed down, it slowed down as well. The distance between us wasn't changing by a single meter. My phone started ringing. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I didn't answer. 5 seconds later, it rang again. The same number again. This time the little girl spoke. "Don't answer." "Why?" "Because it isn't you." I couldn't understand what she meant. The phone rang for the third time. I couldn't stand it. I answered. Sound came from the other side for a few seconds then. I spoke. No, my voice spoke. Ethan. No, Marcus. I had even confused my own name for a moment. The voice on the phone continued. Marcus. Don't look behind you, my breath hitched. Because at the same time, the little girl in the back seat said the exact same sentence. Look behind you. Phone almost fell from my hand. Are you? I shouted. The voice on the phone laughed. That laugh belonged entirely to me. Then he whispered, I am the Marcus who couldn't return home. Line disconnected. A dead silence formed in the car. The little girl closed her eyes. He reached you. Other one. Can see you now too. My heart was beating like crazy. Right at that moment, the navigation recalculated on its own. The address on the screen had changed. A moment ago it said 742 Willow Street. Now 742 Willow Street. Underneath it, a new line in red letters had appeared. Estimated arrival. 12 years ago. I stared blankly at the screen. The phone must have been broken. But the little girl wasn't surprised at all. She just looked out the window and said in a very calm voice, if we are late, you won't be able to save me again. Moment I heard that sentence, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned bone white. You won't be able to save me again. The word that bothered me the most was again. Do you mean again? The little girl stayed silent for a few seconds, then she whispered, this isn't your first try. My heart began to beat rapidly. I am seeing you for the first time in my life. Girl shook her head slowly from side to side. No, you just don't remember. Right at that moment, in the rearview mirror, the headlights of the black taxi behind us went out. Suddenly, it vanished into the darkness. Oh, I took a deep breath. It was gone just when I thought I was relieved. The headlights turned back on, but this time, it wasn't behind us, it was in front of us. About 50 meters ahead, the same black taxi had stopped in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes at the last second. The tires shrieked on the asphalt. My vehicle stopped a few centimeters short of the black taxi's bumper. I was out of breath. In the light of the headlights, I could see the driver's seat. Someone was sitting at the wheel, but I couldn't make out his face. The little girl began to tremble. Don't go. What? Don't go near him. Get out of the car. Just as she said this, the black taxi's driver door opened slowly. Someone stepped out from inside. He walked toward the front of the headlights. I couldn't believe my eyes. The man was me. Same height. Same hair, same jacket, same face, only. He looked much older. His face was covered in wounds. There was a deep cut on his right cheek. Dark circles had formed under his eyes. It was as if he hadn't slept for years. The older Marcus approached my taxi with heavy steps. He knocked on the window. Thud, thud, thud. I didn't open the door, nor did I roll down the window. I was simply frozen in place. The older Marcus moved his lips. Even though the window was closed, I heard what he said clearly. Leave her this time. Right at that moment, the little girl in the back seat began to cry. She was crying for the first time. Listen to him. He is lying. He says the same thing every time. Rumbles began to form inside my head. On one side, the older Marcus outside the window. On the other side, the little girl in the back seat. Both were telling me completely opposite things. I didn't know which one to believe, just as I was trying to decide. The older Marcus pulled an old, worn newspaper clipping from his pocket. He pressed it against the window. When I read the headline, my breath hitched. 10-year-old girl loses her life due to taxi driver's mistake. Under the photo was me. But the date of the news didn't belong to today. It belonged to 12 years later. I looked at the newspaper clipping for seconds. My hands were shaking. The headline looked real. Underneath was my photo. The jacket I am wearing right now. The same expression on my face. Even the location where the photo was taken was the street we were on. But the date, August 7, 2036, it was exactly 12 years later. The older Marcus outside the window slowly pointed at the newspaper with his hand. Then he moved his lips. Everything begins here. Little girl in the back seat screamed. You listen to what he says. Everything will happen again. My head had begun to throb. They were talking at the same time from both sides. I could no longer distinguish anything right at that moment. A notification came to my phone. I looked at the screen involuntarily. New ride request passenger. Emily Foster. I turned to the little girl in the back seat. Is your name Emily? The girl's face turned white as a sheet. I had never asked her name, but it was written on the screen, Emily Foster. The girl closed her eyes. So, he learned this time too. learned before the girl could answer. Older Marcus outside the window pulled an old photograph of a child from his pocket. He leaned the photo against the window. In the photo, there was a girl of about 10 years old wearing a light blue dress, her hair braided, the exact girl in my back seat. A single sentence was written on the back of the photo. "You couldn't take me home." My throat tightened right at that moment. A very slow voice came from the back seat. "Marcus." I looked in the mirror. The little girl was no longer alone. Beside her, a woman was sitting. She was in her late 30s. Her face looked incredibly like the little girl's. It was as if she was her grown-up self. The woman looked at me through tears, then she touched the little girl's shoulder. "We can succeed this time." My heart felt like it was going to stop. "Are you?" The woman smiled painfully. "If you had taken me home that night, this is what I would have looked like." At that moment, something snapped in my brain. In the back seat, the past and an unfulfilled future were sitting side by side. Right at that moment, the black taxi's engine started on its own. The older Marcus took the wheel. He knocked on the window one last time and said only a single sentence. "This time you will decide which one to take home." Older Marcus's last sentence kept echoing inside my head. "This time you will decide which one to take home." I couldn't lift my foot off the brake. I was frozen at the wheel. In the back seat, little Emily was looking at me silently. The adult woman beside her was trying to hold back her tears. Both were the same person. One was the past, the other was a future that never happened. Right at that moment, the navigation spoke again. 300 meters to destination. I looked at the map. The address had changed again. This time there were two different routes on the screen. The first was green 742 Willow Street. The second was red, Los Angeles Memorial Cemetery. "What is this?" I whispered. The navigation answered on its own for the first time. "Make a choice." My chest began to tighten. I hadn't pressed any buttons. The green route was slowly flashing. The red route was constantly growing. Right at that moment, little Emily held my hand. It was the first time I touched her skin. It was ice cold. "Please, take me home." Adult Emily shook her head from side to side. "No, choose me. If you choose her, both of us will cease to exist." A single word came out of my mouth. The older Marcus outside slammed his fist onto the hood of the car. "Hurry, the time is coming." I looked at the clock on the instrument panel. 03:33. A second later. Right at that moment, the clock completely vanished. In its place, a single sentence was written: "Too late." At once, all the lights inside the taxi went out. I heard a deafening sound of brakes followed by a violent collision. I squeezed my eyes shut. Everything went silent within a few seconds. When I opened my eyes slowly, the sun was rising. My taxi was parked by the side of the road. The engine was running. The doors were open. The back seat was completely empty. There was no one. The black taxi had vanished as well. I took a deep breath and immediately drove away from there. That day, I went to the company and handed in my resignation. I never worked the night shift again. Months later, I gave in to my curiosity. I researched the address 742 Willow Street on the internet. An old newspaper report came up in front of me. In 2012, 10-year-old Emily Foster disappeared while returning home alone. Her body was never found. When I saw the photo under the report, my knees gave out. The girl in the photo was the Emily sitting in my taxi. While trying to close the page, I saw a small note at the very bottom of the screen that I hadn't paid attention to. The last witness to the incident was a taxi driver. I opened the report. The driver's name was written, Marcus Hill. Underneath it was a single sentence. Driver stated that the girl never got into his vehicle. Phone dropped from my hand because I knew she really had gotten in. Just as I bent down to pick up the phone from the ground, the screen opened on its own. A new notification had arrived, the old taxi app. The app I had deleted months ago. The notification only said, "New ride request passenger, Emily Foster pickup location, back seat." At that moment, a little girl's voice came from behind me. "This time, and you see me." I turned around slowly. The back seat was empty, but the seatbelt was closing on its own. Click.